Beyond the stereotype, why no one asks Black women why. Have you ever noticed how quickly we label people without asking what's beneath the surface? How easily we dismiss someone's emotions without ever seeking to understand their source? I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Timi Akande, a remarkable senior associate at Meso, whose insights have transformed not just my understanding, but the landscape of how we perceive Black women in professional spaces. Her powerful advocacy work has sparked crucial conversations about microaggressions and organizational change that are literally reshaping workplaces across the country. Timmy stands as a beacon of courage in spaces where silence has been the norm, challenging systems while offering wisdom that bridges understanding across different lived experiences. Imagine walking into a meeting, offering a suggestion, and watching as your idea floats unacknowledged in the air. 10 minutes later, a colleague repeats your exact words, and suddenly everyone's nodding in agreement, praising their brilliance. Now imagine this happening, and not once, but daily, for years, not just in one job, but in every professional space you enter. For many Black women, this isn't imagination. It's Tuesday and Wednesday and every other day of the week when a Black woman finally speaks up about this pattern, when she finally says, I just said that, what happens? She's not thanked for her contribution. She's labeled aggressive, difficult, or that particularly insidious phrase, an angry Black woman. But here's what's fascinating and heartbreaking: almost no one stops to ask her why. Why might she be frustrated? Why might she feel invisible? Why might years of having her expertise questioned, her voice diminished, and her presence treated as an afterthought lead to a moment of justified assertion? No one asks why because the stereotype provides a convenient shortcut. It's easier to dismiss than to dig deeper. It's more comfortable to apply a label than to confront our own complicity in creating the conditions that might reasonably provoke frustration. This isn't just about hurt feelings. This is about a systemic failure to recognize humanity. When I spoke with Timmy about her experiences in progressive organizations, she described the daily microaggressions that created a crushing weight of self doubt. I found myself constantly monitoring my responses, she told me, calculating every word, every facial expression to avoid being labeled as the angry Black woman. Think about that emotional labor for a moment. Imagine spending your workday not just doing your job, but performing a secondary invisible job of managing how others perceive your completely reasonable reactions. It's like running a marathon while simultaneously juggling flaming torches, except the marathon never ends, and dropping even one torch can burn your entire career. It's exhausting, it's unfair, and it's happening in the very spaces that pride themselves on being progressive. A qualitative study of Black women faculty in academic nursing revealed the same pattern. These accomplished professionals, women with advanced degrees, groundbreaking research, and decades of expertise, faced constant questioning of their legitimacy. They were excluded from important networks. They felt pressure to perform exceptional labor just to be accepted as equals. And all while walking the tightrope of assertiveness, knowing that behavior that would be called passionate or direct in others would be labeled as angry or aggressive in them. One participant in the study put it perfectly: I'm constantly doing mental gymnastics in white spaces. Mental gymnastics, not by choice, but by necessity. The emotional toll is staggering. A narrative inquiry into racial battle fatigue among Black women administrators documented how this constant vigilance affects not just careers, but health. The persistent exposure to racialized stress, stereotypes, and pressure to overperform led to exhaustion, career stagnation, and actual physical health problems. One administrator described it as death by 1,000 paper cuts. Each microaggression might seem small in isolation, but the cumulative effect is devastating. Imagine carrying that weight day after day, year after year, while still being expected to perform at exceptional levels. Let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. We're in the era of emotional intelligence and psychological safety in workplaces. Companies spend millions on diversity initiatives. Leaders attend unconscious bias training. We have book clubs and listening sessions and inclusion committees. Yet Black women are still chased out of these supposedly enlightened spaces. Why? Because we've confused symbolic gestures with systemic change, because we still don't ask why. What's particularly striking is the resilience these women demonstrate. Despite these obstacles, the women in these studies persisted. They built communities of support. They mentored others. They pushed for policy change. They found ways to survive and even thrive. But should survival be the bar? Should extraordinary resilience be required just to exist in professional spaces? I don't think so. And I don't think you do either. Here's where we need to shift our thinking. This isn't about Black women needing to develop thicker skin. It's not about them needing more resilience strategies or self care practices, though those things matter. This is about systems that need to change. This is about the rest of us needing to do better. What if instead of labeling, we listened? What if instead of dismissing, we dug deeper? What if we simply asked why? I notice you seem frustrated. Can you help me understand why? I want to make sure I'm hearing you. What am I missing? What's been your experience with this issue? Simple questions that acknowledge humanity. Simple questions that create space for truth. When we fail to ask these questions, we're not just perpetuating stereotypes. We're missing opportunities for connection, for understanding, for growth. And we're placing the entire burden of adaptation on those already carrying the heaviest loads. Let me be clear, this isn't about pity. The Black women in these studies don't need your pity. They need your partnership in creating change. They need workplaces where their expertise isn't constantly questioned. They need communities where their voices are heard the first time. They need the freedom to express a full range of emotions without being reduced to a stereotype. They need what we all need, to be seen as fully human. I'm reminded of something powerful that emerged from the study on Black women in academic nursing. Many participants described the exhaustion of constantly code switching, adjusting their language, tone, and self expression to fit into predominantly white spaces. One woman said, I spend so much energy translating myself that sometimes I forget who I actually am. Think about that. The cost isn't just professional, it's deeply personal. It's an erasure of self that happens so gradually, so insidiously that you might not notice until one day you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person looking back. In our work with high achieving Black women, we often talk about how they've spent years in survival mode, leading teams, raising families, holding down households, carrying communities. They've been strong because they had to be, not because they wanted to be. But strength shouldn't mean suffering in silence. Strength shouldn't mean suppressing your authentic reactions. Strength shouldn't mean carrying burdens alone. True strength comes from communities that share the load, from systems that distribute the weight, from cultures that value all voices. So, what can we do? How do we move from awareness to action? First, if you're not a Black woman, recognize that you might never fully understand this experience. And that's okay. Understanding isn't a prerequisite for action. Second, practice asking why before labeling. When you notice yourself making assumptions about someone's tone or reaction, pause. Get curious instead of judgmental. Third, if you're in a position of leadership, examine your systems. Who gets interrupted in meetings? Whose ideas get attributed to others? Who gets labeled as difficult when they advocate for themselves? These patterns tell you something important about your culture. Fourth, share the burden of education and advocacy. Don't rely on Black women to teach you about their experiences. Do your own research. Have uncomfortable conversation with people who look like you. Challenge stereotypes when you hear them. The time for polite conversations is over. The time for symbolic gestures has passed. What we need now is radical honesty and concrete action. I want you to leave here today with more than just awareness. I want you to leave with a commitment to disruption, a commitment to asking why when others rush to label, a commitment to creating spaces where Black women don't have to perform constant emotional labor just to exist. The angry Black woman stereotype isn't about Black women's anger. It's about our collective unwillingness to face the conditions that might justifiably provoke that anger. So I challenge you, all of us, to be the person who asks why, to be the one who listens when others dismiss, to be the colleague who speaks up when ideas are appropriated, to be the leader who creates systems where everyone's humanity is recognized and respected. Because when we move beyond stereotypes to genuine understanding, we don't just liberate Black women from the burden of constant performance. We liberate ourselves from the limitations of our own assumptions. We create workplaces that harness the full power of human potential. We build communities where everyone can bring their whole authentic selves. And that world, a world where we all share the burden of change, is the world where we all become more fully human. That's not just a nice idea, it's an urgent necessity. And it starts with a simple question: why?